Hello, my name is Matthew, and for the month of October, Steve Donahue and I are reading The Vampire Lestat, a novel by Anne Rice. This is a part of our little book club that we have together, reading something each month. And for the month of October, we're reading a vampire novel. And for this week, I read parts 2 and 3. The titles are part 2, The Legacy of Magnus, and then part 3, Viaticum for the Marquis. Steve and I are doing this very informally, and it seems like we're actually uh, figuring out the logistics of the read along on screen, which I think is hilarious. So I'm loving this book so far. It's a page turner, it's great fun, and I'm surprised. I'm so surprised that the elements of the novel that I'm really enjoying are absolutely not what I would have anticipated. So, for a vampire novel, for the very little that I know of Anne Rice, which is pretty much from seeing the movie Interview with the Vampire, my expectations were to get really interested in the supernatural elements of vampire lore or the horror elements of monsters. A lot of suspense, shocking turn of events. Essentially, I thought my interest was going to focus, rest on plot driven aspects. And it's not at all. It's, for me, I'm so invested in the character development, the mindset of Lestat. I find him fascinating as a character and endlessly entertaining as a voice. So we're at parts. We read parts 2 and 3, and when part 1 ends, we have Lestat, his very intimate friend Nicholas, leaving for Paris by Lestat's by Lestat's mother's insistence, and we have this great we have these great discussions between Lestat and Nicholas, philosophical discussions, and crucially, they're living in the age of enlightenment, and they're talking about whether God exists and a deterministic life, or is there elements of free will, and is there a real goodness in the world, like the idea of goodness? Is there good and evil? Is there a real thing as evil? What role does religion play in a modern, enlightened society? All these great discussions, and they are also artists and performers. Lestat is an aspiring actor. Nicholas is an aspiring musician, and it ends with part 1 ends with Lestat and Nicholas in Paris and starting to make their dreams come true. Lestat is on stage. Nicholas hasn't been quite as successful, but he is playing his music. And all the while, there's a presence. One of the most dramatic parts of part 1 was this wolf hunt, which has been a recurring memory, or just an important moment in Lestat's life, and an important moment in the plot of the novel, it seems. So Lestat's mother sends them up to Paris, and there's this presence in the crowd. in the audience, Lestat can sense that there's something watching him. So, beginning part two, I'm thinking to myself, well, now I'm really interested in the transformation. How, why is Lestat going to become a vampire? It's the requisite moment of the novel. And I was pleasantly surprised. My expectation was that maybe there was going to be some long romance, seduction was going to be involved, something like that. And instead, it's abrupt, it's monstrous, it's inhuman, it's scary. Essentially, Lestat is just abducted by a vampire and transformed against his will. The vampire's name is Magnus. He's described, not in human terms, purely demonic terms. He might have a human looking body, but nothing about him is human. He's pure vampire. And almost as soon as Lestat is transformed into a vampire, given minimal amounts of instruction and warning, Magnus, the vampire that transformed him, throws himself into a fire and is burned to ashes. Lestat is told to scatter the ashes. Otherwise, there's a chance that he might come back. And if he comes back, Lestat is going to pay for it. And we get this really great gothic, supernatural atmosphere that's created. Lestat is in a tower, and there's a crypt and a secret passageway, and the coffin where he lays, and there's chests full of jewels and gold and very aristocratic, royal trinkets, things that are little knives and swords that are gilded with gold and pearls, and it's all the things that the vampire Magnus had collected through the centuries. And Lestat now is left ripped out of his world, turned into a monster, and he's alone. He's frightened, having to learn on the fly what it's like to be a vampire. What do you do as a vampire? And I think it's so fascinating that we start meeting vampires. Vampires start showing up in the novel. Lestat is clinging on to his humanity and is still thinking about his friend Nicholas. He's sending him gifts, sending the theater money. He's interested in the success of the theater. He feels bad for the way that he left Nicholas. And these other vampires are just, they're described as demons or demonic forms, or just vampires. And Lestat is just clinging on to these human sensibilities. He still has human thoughts about right and wrong, good and evil. How do you get along and treat the humans? I think it's nearly essential for a book like this that in order for the reader to connect with the main Lestat vampire, is that he does have human characteristics. He's not a complete monstrous savage, but that element in context, the way that it plays with the story, I think is so interesting. One of the surprise turn of events is that um, Lestat's mother finally, or unexpectedly, arrives in Paris. Um, Lestat had this um, moment where he decided to go to the theater. He's going to show himself to Nicholas. He ends up getting on stage, creates absolute havoc, does not go, at least how I thought it would go. Just the whole place turns upside down. And Lestat comes up with this idea that he's going to have Nicholas take his mother to Italy, where she wants to be, so that'll take care of them, and then Lestat will be able to finally make amends for these different elements in his human life that he regrets. But the mother shows up, she's dying, and Lestat has to visit her in a room in Paris. Nicholas is there, a couple other people are there, and very surprisingly, it ends with Lestat transforming his mother into a vampire to save her from dying. And just like all the other vampires that we meet, she immediately takes on the vampiric attributes that you would expect from a creature that is no longer human. She quickly starts devouring humans for their blood with no remorse. She wants to live this vampiric lifestyle. Some bits of humor. She's very surprised to find out that Lestat is still shopping. He's still going to stores with the money that he has to buy clothes, which, as a human, makes perfectly good sense. And the mother is saying, well, we're vampires. We can read minds. We're eating these creatures. We can just go about as we please. We can enter people's homes and just take whatever we want. Interesting things, details like that I found fascinating. Now, all the while, we still have this horror element that is so well executed, and it's this feeling of a presence, or maybe many presences, that with their psychic abilities, they can really sense that there's these demonic things following them around. The mother, meanwhile, who is no longer human in any way, also seems to have taken on more of the vampire persona and powers. So she seems like she might be stronger than Lestat in certain ways. Her mental acuity with the psychic abilities. So the presence finally, that we finally have an action set piece where demons, importantly demons, they're either demons or vampires, make their appearance. There's a battle. They're very scary. The demons follow Lestat and his mother, Gabrielle, into their home. They're right outside of the house behind barred windows. And finally a word comes out, and it's outlaw. They make it through the night, or make it through into the morning, where all the vampires have to go to sleep, and they decide that they need to escape Paris and go somewhere else. And Lestat has this brilliant idea of going to a church, go to an old French church that has a crypt. The vampires would never go there, and they can come and go as they please. The only part of the novel that left me confused, um, it's supposed to be another exciting, chaotic set piece, is that they wake up at nighttime, at sundown. Lestat and Gabriel are sharing the same tomb together, and they hear um, um, activities of church. They're hearing singing and praying and rituals, and I didn't quite understand um, the location, the layout of the environment, because I would have expected the crypt to be underground, but they weren't able to open up the coffin um, without everyone in the church seeing them. So I didn't quite understand that, but they pop out in front of uh, just a church full of celebrants, and it just goes complete madness. Everyone's freaking out because there's these vampires. Um, they go back to Paris, and then we have a confrontation with, again, a very demonic, inhuman creature um, in, I believe it was Notre Dame, in the cathedral. And what we learn is that um, it's blasphemy, for lack of a better term, for vampires to enter the house of God, to go into a church. And there's been these details throughout the novel showing um, how monstrous, how demonic the vampires are, um, but also superstitious. Magnus, at the very beginning, warned Lestat that his first victim, he shouldn't suck the blood until the victim's heart stops. He has to stop before the victim dies. And then later on, Lestat forgets this detail, and his mother, her first victim, she drinks the blood until it completely dies, until the victim completely dies. And it turned out nothing happened. Lestat can hold crucifixes, wear a rosary, he can go into a church, and these are things that are just impossible for a vampire to wrap their heads around. And I love that because, it seems to me, because Lestat is holding on to his humanity, he's also holding on to the age of enlightenment and deciding, well, I don't require these superstitious elements to rule or guide my behavior. And through his behavior, it's shown that nothing really bad happens. The crucifix doesn't burn his skin, for example. And it ends with I this demon creature having a fight with Lestat, and we're moving on from there. So there's a battle brewing with what seems to be a centuries-old tradition of organized vampire culture, and Lestat being this newcomer who's breaking the rules, and so it's almost like this generational battle, like fathers and sons or something. Um, and that element of Lestat's humanity really punctuated compared to all the other vampires who are absolutely inhuman, demonic. I find it fascinating. So those are my thoughts on parts 2 and 3. I'm not sure if I'm kind of guiding it. It might be Next week could be parts 4 and 5, 4, 5, and 6. I think my reading will be accelerating as I carry on because it's really a hard book to put down. Those are my thoughts on parts 2 and 3. I'm really looking forward to hearing Steve's thoughts, of course. And if you're reading along, if you've already read it, please let me know what you think. Let me know what you think about any of my thoughts. And thank you for watching. Please leave a comment if you would like, and take care.